What's up, guys? Bill here. In this video, I'm going to talk about how I use Flow. This is a member of the Discord requested video, which is one of the perks of being in my Discord. You can request videos on any type of content you'd like to learn about. So in this one, I'm going to talk about how I use Flow to find trade ideas and more normally use Flow to build extra conviction for plays I already like based on technicals. And I use Tradytics for my Flow. There's a lot of services out there, Unusual Whales, Black Box. They all kind of offer the same stuff for the most part, just dressed up in a different way. So even if you don't use Tradytics, you could find some valuable information in this video. So here's the main Flow page on Tradytics. And essentially this is like the hub. They have a lot of other tools we'll get to in a little bit, where they break out certain types of Flow that they think are important. In different ways that you can use, but you're always going to want to come back here and verify the validity of the Flow, because Flow can be a little tricky and misleading at times. And if you don't really understand it, you can misinterpret it and get yourself in some trouble on trades you take. So you're going to want to come back to this page all the time and look at certain things. And the three main things I look at and consider when I'm dissecting Flow are, is it useful or unuseful? And is it unusual? Okay, so let's talk about the things I feel like are unuseful first, right? And Tradytics does a great job either through color coding or breaking out with highlights and things, different types of information that they deem useful. So a lot of this, when you get used to the page and you get used to having your eyes on it, you can just quickly discern for yourself the important aspects. But essentially, what I think is unuseful are index flow. So if you see flow for SPX, IWM, QQQ, unuseful, mostly used for hedging. All right. Deep in the money flow. So you're looking at a stock that's trading at $100 and they're buying calls, but for an 80 strike, not going to be that useful. Usually also hedging and or arbitrage trading. That's just, they're not really directional. They don't care so much about the direction of the stock moving. Okay. We want to find flow where people are making aggressive bets that the stock is going to go either up or down. All right. So useful is kind of the opposite, or on the opposite side, right? We want stuff that's out of the money. We want stuff that's a little closer to expiration. If you see bets being made on leaps, it's something to take into consideration, but these people are not betting that the stock's going to be moving the next couple days or even the next week or month, right? They're buying so much time. This is not going to play as big of a role in moving underlying price as closer to expiry flow. So we're looking for that. We're also looking for things like splits and sweeps. These are types of orders that show that the trader is in a hurry to get in, either by buying a ton, really quickly, or having to place orders on different brokerages to get their order in and kind of disguise it and hide it and get in as quick as possible. That's something you look for. There's also the bid and ask side, right? So, for the most part, if something is placed at the bid, it's going to be selling. And if it's placed at the ask, it's going to be bought. Furthermore, if they're placing it above the ask, that usually shows aggressive entry, right? They really need to get in, want to get in. So you get above the ask calls, that's very aggressively bullish. Or if you got below the bid puts, that would be very aggressively bearish. There's also, wanting to understand, are things bought or sold, right? So that's where when I talked earlier about how Tradytics does a good job kind of color coding things to make it easier for you to understand, that's where these colors come in, green and red. So green is bullish, red is bearish. Yellow is very bullish and white is very bearish. So you'll see things like these calls to the bid. They're most likely either sold or written. All right. So how do you tell, Are they actually just someone taking profit or selling their calls because they're worried that the stock's going to continue to go down? Or are they writing calls? Both bearish. Either they're selling to take profit, or they're selling because they're worried about the position, or they're writing the calls. Well, Tradytics does a pretty good job labeling whether these trades are being opened or closed. And it's not an exact science, right? But we try to do our best. And so this tab over here that shows if things are opening or not, when it's an opening trade that's being put at the bid, that usually means that these are being written, not bought or sold. All right. So a written call here, bearish, right? That's kind of like the things you want to look for mainly for what's useful in trying to discern, is this flow I need to pay attention to? And is it actually bought or sold? Because some of the tools that we'll look at later that have flow data, they can mislead you, right? You can think that these calls, because of the money that came in or whatever, are all bullish, but then you come back here and you find out they're written, okay? So that's why we're starting here and learning about this page so that you can use this always to verify the flow data you find on the other tools on the site. Unusual flow, all right? Things that are useful and unusual. Volume over open interest. So when someone comes in and places an order that's multiple times bigger than the open interest on the chain currently, that is notable and unusual and very useful. Tradytics highlights these orders in blue. Okay. Also, just the money, right? Like if there's a ton of money and it's relatively large for that type of stock, I mean, some stocks trade millions on orders all the time and it's not as, notable, but some stocks, once you learn them more and learn what their average order is, are very big. And Tradytics does a good job of trying to highlight those too, when it's unusually large by putting a yellow text and a star next to the order. Okay. Those are things you want to look for. The cool thing is you can filter a lot of this stuff. So, there's so much flow all day, right? Like this first page, is just like 20 minutes of flow, right? And you go to the filters tab and we can get rid of all that stuff that we talked about really not wanting. We don't want ETFs. All right. We don't want spreads. Spreads are hedging, a hedging technique. All right. So we don't want spreads. All right. We want stuff that's out of the money. All right. This is just my base filter. I'll always filter like this. You can get even more aggressive by saying, hey, I only want sweeps, or I only want to see that volume over interest flow, the orders that have the blue text under volume. I only want those, or I only want short expiry. I believe Tradytics deems short expiry in the next 2 weeks. Okay. And you can filter these on and off, as you wish, right? That's how I go about it. Okay. And that's just this is the main page. That's basically all you need to know. It is a lot though, and you want to get your eyes used to it, and you can enter any ticker you want, and go search their individual flow and filter and everything like that. You can, base it just on your watch lists. So, I really like using the watch list feature on this website, and I have 100 and some tickers in there. And then I can just look at stuff that's on my watch list through the day if I'm looking for stuff, and go through it like that. But let's move on and talk about some of the tools that they have that kind of helps do this job for you, this hunting job of finding, interesting flow throughout the day. All right. The first one is Tradyflow. And what this page does is try to find repeat flow, which is another type of unusual flow, right? So we know that size can be unusual. The type of order, sweeps and splits and things like, or sweeps and splits, things like that. Super short-term to expiry, super far out of the money, all unusual. But also the number of different orders that are coming in at this certain chain, the certain strike and expiry on a stock, right? And that's what we have here, is anything where there's been 5 or more repeat orders will show up in Tradyflow, okay? The more orders, the better. So you can see here, TTD puts 21. That's pretty good. Someone back tested this a while ago. I don't know if it's still super accurate, if things have changed or whatever, but basically they looked at anytime 10 or plus orders were made and anytime 25 or plus orders were made. The 10 plus orders ended up in the money at some point but before expiry about 60% of the time. Okay. 25 plus orders ended up in the money at some point before expiry 80% of the time. Now, 25 plus orders does not happen often. You can see scanning through here, on this first page, we don't even have one, but filters. You can go back and look at your filters. So we always want to filter out, these things we don't like, right? We don't want indexes or ETFs. All right. So looking at these names, gold ETF, QQQ ETF, mid-cap ETF, or small to mid-cap ETF, more gold ETF. There's only 2 names here that aren't ETFs. But as you can see, big orders, right? Let's look at Marvell, because Marvell was a flow that we saw in the room and a lot of us traded it. All right. So back on 118, these orders came in on Marvell for 72.5 calls. At the time, the stock was trading at 68.5. So nicely out of the money. I mean, sometimes you get things like, you see with these index flows, they're buying just $1 out of the money or less. That's not really that notable. Plus it's index, so we ignore it anyway. But these came in decently out of the money. Huge order, big money, right? Let's look at Marvell. So 118 came in at 68.50. All right. Here's 118. It closed at 68.25. So they bought like up here. We closed here. Just 2 days later, for a brief instant, they were in the money. 2 days later. And then, if you're a swing trader, and that's what this info is best for, this trading flow info is to swing. You could have took a bunch of profit there, set a break-even stop. And then the next 2 days, been even deeper in the money, $1 in the money on day 5. All right. So these do have a very high hit rate, but they don't come around often. So you just got to keep your eyes peeled, check it every day and see if anything comes in that you can use, that meets all our criteria for stuff that we want to pay attention to. There's also OpenTra, which is a tool that scans for chains that are getting a ton of money activity. So we just saw a tool that scans for chains that get a lot of repeat order activity. This tool looks for the net premiums, how much money is being spent, right? We still need to go back to that main hub page and verify that this is actually bought or not bought or sold calls and things like that. But it's a good way to start your scanning, and save yourself time than just going order by order over thousands of orders from the main page, right? So when I'm looking at these boxes, I'm looking for all the stuff that's important, right? I'm ignoring indexes. I'm looking at, is it out the money? Farther out, the better. Is it soon to expiry? Closer to expiry, the better, right? So let's see here. NVIDIA, yeah, that's out of the money, and it was a weekly at the time. That's good flow. DraftKings, ooh, it's really out of the money. And it's only a month till expiration. That's really good flow, right? SPX, we ignore it. Okay? It's the same process over and over, just, other tool. You would want to, at this point, take DraftKings, go back into the live options flow, and kind of check it out, right? One thing that's interesting here is, you look at DraftKings, and this is one chain, right? Very active chain, 50 calls for March 15th, a monthly expiry. But then you go back to the live options flow, and overall the flow on the day is actually bearish. Okay. Now that can be a lot because of sold calls taking profits, right? DraftKings had earnings that day, the day before, and kind of pumped a little bit after selling off originally. So you're looking at all these calls and they're sold, but they're not opened, right? So it could just be taking profit. It's not necessarily that these people are betting that the stock's going to go down. They're not writing these calls, right? So this is why it's important to just go through and look at the orders. Once you maybe are interested in taking a trade based on the flow, just go through and verify that you're not getting tricked into seeing big green premiums on something. Well, maybe it's actually being written and it's a bunch of bearish activity. And the more you scroll over, you can actually see stuff that Tradytics is saying, well, we think these are actually sold calls, but you still don't know if it's sold calls because of profit taking or writing until you go into TradyFlow and look at it. Or I'm sorry, into the live options flow and look at it. All right. With net premiums, I tend to want to see at least 6 figures. So like something like AMAT, just 79K, or Amazon 39K. I usually don't pay a ton of attention to that, especially on something like Amazon that gets, a lot heavier flow than that when people are really piling in. And you can look at the puts hottest change as well with the same exact thing in mind. You're going to want to see your strikes below your spots to show that it's actually out of the money puts and all that. See, we TTD here, really nice out of the money, but it's a leap. So maybe it's not something we pay that as much attention to for like the next day of trading. Okay. Lastly, flow line. This can be useful. Essentially what it is, if you're familiar with market net flow on SPY, which I have videos on if you're not, this is like a collection of any stocks you want to put in here and their net flow. And the way I use it is to track the Magnificent Seven, essentially. They allow you to do 3 or 9 different stocks at a time. So I track the Mag 7 and I throw in AMD and Exxon there. And I just use it to kind of get a feel of like what has great flow that day. Usually if these stocks have really strong bullish or bearish flow, it's going to be a big impact on the market. And I can quickly scan through here, but I mean, you can add any stocks you want and you can set the days till expiration and the amount of days backward looking they're checking at the flow. But I set it up like market net flow. So I just want to see today's flow and I want it to be all the expirations, right? Which means unfiltered, right? So whether it's 0 DTEs or, on individual stocks, it's usually going to be, whether it's weeklies, monthlies, leaps, they're all in here. But I just use it to get a quick glance at some of the major stocks in the market and see what they're looking for. And we're looking for divergences like on Amazon here. Calls just continue to go up while puts stay flat. It give you an idea for maybe day trades. You see something like, oh, wow, look at all this call buying NVIDIA and put selling and puts are flat. NVIDIA, let me check out that chart. Oh, yeah, price is strong as well. I mean, one great thing is when you see the white line, which is the stock's price, we see it plummeting here, but flow continuing to go up. This could give you an idea of, hey, let me see if NVIDIA is pulling down towards any major supports on my chart because call buyers are aggressive here and maybe I can grab some discounted calls. And what happens? NVIDIA ends up catching up to its flow and making a nice move up. About a, 726 to 740, $14 move there in just about an hour and a half, right? So this, you can set up any tickers you like. If you're someone who just trades a very small selection of tickers, this is good for you to always be able to quickly reference flow on some of your favorite stocks and maybe get some trade ideas. But that is how I use flow, whether it's for day trading, on a page like this, whether it's for my nightly prep when I'm going through flow from the previous day, looking at what chains were the hottest, calls or puts to maybe keep that on my, add that to my watch list for the next day, or whether it's for swing trades or looking for stuff with a ton of repeat orders that I can start to look for maybe a swing on. and then the live options flow page where I can scan all day and also go back and verify everything that I found on these other tools and make sure it's good flow and trustworthy flow. But that is how I use it. If you have any questions, just let me know, leave a comment or find me on Twitter and I'll help you out.